Just my prayer coming into this for myself and for you all was that we would have a desire to know him more and to make him known. A desire to know him more and to make him known. And with that, I'll just say I was listening to the testimonies, and as encouraging as they were, sometimes testimonies like that have an unintended consequence because they put a burning in your heart to go overseas that can overshadow the call to go across the street. To get so focused on the nations, we forget about our neighbors. And my desire, Gerald's desire, all of our desires is that we would have a both and mentality among this group. Is that we would never value the nations over the neighborhoods, and we would never value the neighborhoods over the nations, but we would see that Jesus is worthy of them both. And we would never get the mindset that says missionary work only happens in another country. That I need to get on a plane to fulfill my calling. I don't think you'll mind me saying this, but there's a brother in the room today I had the privilege of talking to yesterday, Friday, or late last week sometime. I don't have time for this. I need to, my notes are really packed. But I don't know, Lord, you're the good shepherd. There's a brother, his name is Chet. You guys are going to get to know him a little bit more. I had the privilege to know him. The Lord has been doing an amazing work in his life. He's from Bhutan. He has an extended family of about 57 people. And about 2 years ago, the Lord brought him out of Hinduism and showed him that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And next week, we will have the privilege of baptizing him. Chet, why don't you just go ahead and stand up for a second? Just stand up. Eden Center, if you missed him, if he wasn't in your camera, he's a handsome guy. He's got an American flag hat on, so when you see him, say hi to him. I asked him, who would there be somebody special to baptize you? And he essentially said, I'd like to be baptized by somebody from the church, and I'd like for you to baptize me. And I said, I'd be honored to baptize you. I said, but let's see if there's somebody better. And so we're going to have just another regular disciple named Joshua, one of you sitting among the crowd in the baptismal pool, because that's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. So when you see testimonies like that, keep one eye on the nations, but keep one eye on the person living next door to you. One eye on those across the world, but one eye on the person across the hall at your workplace, or one aisle over in the supermarket, and say, I'm going to follow them outside and catch them in the parking lot and ask them if they know about Jesus. It sounds weird, but it works. All right, well, we are indeed in our 4th week of disciple making. How many of you have begun to get into a rhythm of using some of these tools? Just raise your hand high. That's good. How many of you have taught this to at least one other person? Let's see, show of hands. You too in the Eden Center. If you're at home on your couch, raise your hand if that's you too. That's good. We're beginning to see greater and greater multiplication, and I just want to encourage you to step out. Just step out and see what the Lord will do with that. And so we're actually going to start off with celebrations of testimonies, as we always do. Actually, we're going to do one now, and if I didn't eat up all of our time, we're going to have one at the end. I promised you guys that I would finish a story that I started last week. But this morning, we're going to hear from Kayla Avery, who's seen some really good fruit with Kayla Brooks. Her husband's name is Avery. And they are friends with my great friend, whose name is Victor Avery. So he's got the last name Avery, he's got the first name Avery, and now she's got that last name. So I'm playing musical chairs with the last name. So Kayla Brooks, who's married to Avery, is going to share about some of the fruit that she's seen with her prayer calendar. Can we welcome her?
Hi, so yes, my name is Kayla. So this actually was the first week that we started the prayer calendar that I had these testimonies. And this is really special to my heart because these are a friend group that I grew up with and spent a lot of my life with. And so it's just really precious and beautiful that the Lord kind of reconnected me to these people and allowed me to reach out for prayer. So I just started out by introducing like the model of the prayer calendar and kind of how I'm asking the Lord each day who to pray for. And so I reached out to one of my old friends, and the response I got, I'm going to read the responses because they're so powerful, and yeah, just to hear like what the Lord's doing in their hearts and in their lives right now is so powerful. So one of the girls said, "Oh, hi, Kayla. That's super sweet of you. I am in actual need of prayers right now. I feel like I honestly have lost hope in myself lately and want to be a better person and asking myself who or where to turn to. You texting me, that was what I needed actually, and I signed, I think." And so this is the very first person that I reached out to, and I'm like, wow, Lord, okay, you're doing it. This is great. He's so faithful, and I got to just send her a voice recording of my prayer and share the gospel in the midst of that, and just even listen to the Lord for like prophetic pictures and prophetic words and specific scripture to speak over them. So I got a good response back from her. But the second testimony, really, I mean, Avery can attest to this. I was jumping up in the room and I'm like, God, what is crazy? So she responded to me after I introduced the prayer calendar and just asked her what I could pray for her about. And she said, "I miss you so much. I've been struggling a little bit with my mental health. If you could just pray that I could heal and overcome this sadness, it would mean so much." So I also sent her a voice recording, and I prayed. And she said, "Wow, Kayla, that sent chills throughout my entire body. I've never felt like that hearing prayers. Love you. Thank you so much. In Jesus' name, amen." And then a couple minutes later, I have no response yet. She texts back a couple minutes later, "I've been thinking so much of turning to God lately and wanting to go to church. It's a sign you messaged me." Wow. So I have not heard from them since, but just the Lord continues to bring them up and just continuing to pray over those seeds and just that the Lord would be breathing on their hearts and just really contending for their salvation. So I'm so thankful. This is amazing.
So encouraging. Well, I'm going to give you some time to share with one another, and we are going to enter into what we call our kickoff. And if you can remember, that is 5 questions. That is a time of accountability designed to catch up with people and find out how their week has been, both personally and as it's related to the tools. The questions can best be remembered by the phrase up, down, around, out, and in. Let's want to practice those hand motions together. So let's point up, down, around, out, and in. You guys know it. Man, you're on top of it. Celebrate that. Let's make some noise for that. I'm so excited. You guys are amazing. All right, so just a few basic reminders. Up has to do with the high point of the week. Down has to do with the low point of their week. And you want to ask a follow-up question. What would help make things better? And you may or may not be able to help in whatever area that they mentioned. But remember, the loving thing to do is just to see what role the Lord might have you play in their life as you get to know them. The around has to do with needs around them, including family, friends, neighbors, coworkers. And again, you follow up and ask, how can I or we help? The out has to do with going out to share the tool and teach it to someone else, or the story if you're in a Discovery Bible study. And the in is looking inward to reflect on how you did with your I will statement in this particular case. No matter how big or small, celebrate any level of action. And if they weren't able to walk some of that out, ask what hindered them, and then pray for grace for them to be able to walk it out even better this week. And if they weren't here last week, just do your best to give them an overview of what we did. And if you need help, your table host, of course, can help you. I'm going to give you about 15 minutes, and we'll put up a 5-minute timer when we're getting close to the end to help you pace yourself. Just keep in mind, you want to do this in pairs, 2s, not 3s, so that way everyone has a chance to answer the question thoroughly and no one feels overly condensed, so that everyone has a chance to share. All right, so go ahead and break up into pairs, and God bless your time together. Well, all right, everyone. I'm encouraged by all of the conversations and the new friendships that are being made. So we're going to jump straight into our tool for today. And just as a reminder, moving forward, my comments and my instructions are going to be pretty basic and even seem redundant at times or oversimplistic. But that's because we're really trying to operate by 4 principles: biblical, reproducible, practical, and simple. Biblical, reproducible, practical, and simple. Those are the principles that allow things to multiply and transfer from one person to another to another. So the more basic that I can make it for you guys, the easier it will be for you to be able to give it to someone else and then for them to give it to someone else. So last week we began our first pillar, which is know Christ. And all of our pillars come from our foundational passage in Mark 3:13 through 15. So I want to read that passage together. Remember, I'll start you off and then I'll stop reading, or I'll just turn the mic off so that the voice of the room is the loudest voice. Okay, ready? Let's read. And he went up on a mountain. So remember, our first pillar comes from the phrase called to him. It reflects Jesus' priority for us to know him before we do anything. That's why the title of the pillar is called Know Christ. And this is what the tool looks like. It's a little piece of the puzzle missing here. There we go. Now, let me say a few things. Last week we did half of it. And before we get into the second half, if you were here last week, you would have already had this first half of it drawing at least. And if you weren't, don't worry, because I'm going to do a brief overview of the first half before we get into the second half. And I'm going to take things very slowly. The key is to follow along with me rather than feel the need to try to write it all down. I really want you to kind of see this space more like you would see a living room or a coffee shop than you would a college class or some kind of training environment, even though we call it training. Because disciple making is relational. And so there's not this pressure of, oh, I got to get all the knowledge down or I got to get all the pieces down. Some of you are even writing while I'm talking, but that's okay. The Lord will forgive you. But here's the reality of it. It's a much different experience if you go through the process yourself than you simply just gather up all of the information. And so if you'll just trust me to guide you through it, I think what you'll find is that you'll receive it better, you'll remember it more, and you'll feel more comfortable passing it along. Second, I want to encourage you, as I was walking around last time, all of you guys were taking amazing notes, but I noticed that some of you had notes mixed into your diagram, into the drawing, and that was my fault. I apologize. I should have given you better instructions or at least kind of caught that ahead of time. What I encourage you to do is draw the tool on one side of your notebook and have your notes on the other, something like this. So you just have the tool on. I know if you're in the Eden Center, you're watching online, it's hard to see, but just see that I have a open notebook. Tool on one side, notes on the other. And that way you can kind of have an idea or a clear picture of this is what I'm supposed to reproduce, and these are just pointers for me to help remember. So it's like, wait, am I supposed to say this, or does this part of that? It'll really help to keep things kind of delineated for you as you're actually multiplying disciples. And if you already have it down, here's what I'd say. Draw a fresh picture today. It's helpful to do the people that I was trained by and some of the tools that I learned in disciple making. Shout out to Ray and Sarah. They would tell me that they would just be at dinner or they would be in an airport or wherever they were, they would get in their reps. And he would draw the tool for her, she would draw the tool for him. And they were drawing the tool multiple times a day so that it stayed fresh in their minds. And you might think like, well, that seems a lot of work and a lot of redundant. They planted 50 home churches in Houston. 2 people. I mean, they would not take all the credit for themselves because they're multiplying disciples and they're leading people who are doing. And it's one thing to plant 50 churches. That's remarkable in and of itself. But what's more remarkable is they had generations, which means they had people and churches that were multiplying people and planting churches. And the work was continuing on without them. And that's the goal, is for things to be decentralized from one individual or from one couple or from one church. You want for it to be passed down so that when it gets to you, like I won't share too many details, but somebody told me about a group of people that they're sharing the tools with, and that group of people have no idea who I am. And that's success. That's fruit. Not to make a name for yourself, but to empower people to go and make disciples who can make disciples. So, yeah, I encourage you, draw a fresh picture today, even if you already have one. All right, so as a reminder, the purpose of our pillar is to grow in our knowledge and understanding of who Jesus is. That's why it's called Know Christ. We use Matthew 16, 13 through 18 as a reference passage because it's in that passage there's a conversation between Jesus and the disciples that highlights 4 important titles that teach us a lot about him. It's a conversation that highlights 4 important titles that teach us a lot about Jesus. We use the symbol of the cross to help us capture some key details about each title. And so you want to draw the symbol of the cross in the center of your page, similar to what you see on my board. Just remember to leave space on the sides and on the top so that you can draw. And of course, title the top of your paper. I didn't say that. I apologize. Title the top of your paper, Know Christ, and write the passage underneath. And so now we're going to read the passage together. Ready? Let's read. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, amen. So by way of review, our first title comes from verse 13, and it's the Son of Man. Jesus says, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? Say that with me. Say, Son of Man. Let's say it again. Great. And we drew a stick man to symbolize the title. And we learn a lot about this title in Daniel 7, 13 through 14. So we write it underneath the stick man. And our main takeaway from that passage is that Jesus is our eternal King. So we wrote it underneath. I'll give you a moment just to copy that down. Stick man, Daniel 7, 13 through 14, Jesus is the eternal King. Then we ask the question, how does this impact your view of Jesus? The second title came from verse 16, and it says that Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ." Some translations use the word Messiah. All of our pillars come from the ESV translation. Both Messiah and Christ, they just mean someone who's anointed or empowered by God. So we drew a very simple crown as our symbol of power. We learn a lot about the title in Luke 4, 16 through 21. Jesus tells us what he was anointed to do. So we wrote Luke 4, 16 through 21 underneath the crown. And our main takeaway was that he heals and sets free. He heals and sets free. Then we asked the question, how does that passage impact your view of Jesus? And then based on how both titles impacted your view of Jesus, we asked the question, how do you think God wants you to respond or change based on that? And we had you formulate it into an I will statement. I will blank, and then we made sure that there was a time component, and I will do blank within the first 48 hours. So a good example of that is I will pay back the money that I owe to my sister, and I will make the first payment within 48 hours. I will start driving the speed limit I see some nods saying no. Jesus did say to obey the laws of the land, but that's a different sermon. Obedience is better than sacrifice. And I will start, not in 48 hours, today. I will start today. All right, so now we're going to get into our next two titles for Jesus. We're going to we've already read our passage, Matthew 16, 13 through 18, which is what we would have done if we would have come back together after a week of being apart. We would have read our primary passage in Mark, reminding us what our pillar is and why. Then we would have gone over the Matthew 16 passage so that we could identify the next title. And we see the next title in verse 16 as well. It says, Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." The Son of the living God. Say, Son of the living God. Say it again. Son of the living. That just gives me chills in my body. It's like when they said Mufasa. Oof. Say it again. Mufasa. Oof. Just the living God. It just does something. I'm being serious. So we draw a heart to symbolize the title. And the reason why is because the passage we will look at says, the Father loves the Son. The Father loves the Son. And that passage is John 5, 14 through 23. John 5, 14 through 23. Now, in this story, Jesus heals a paralyzed man on the Sabbath. It makes religious leaders angry because they believed he was breaking a religious law. But Jesus uses that as an opportunity to show that he is equal with God. So we're going to read that passage together. It's a little bit of a longer one. So I will read on the mic this time just to help with our pacing. But I do want us to all read it aloud as we do all the other passages. Ready? Let's read. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. And this is why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I am working." This was why the Jews were all seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing. And greater works than these will he show him, so that you may marvel. For as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whom he will. For the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him." So at this point, I would have the group or the person I'm with retell the story. And again, retelling the story is different than summarizing or sharing what stands out, because the point of retelling is to make sure we're actually grasping the words on the page. Because we can't do that in this setting, I'll retell the stories just so that you guys have a general idea of what we're aiming at. And when you're leading other people as they're collectively retelling, it'll kind of help you to kind of gauge that. And again, it's a group thing, so you can ask, okay, are there any other details that were missed? Or would anybody add anything to the story? And if somebody says something that's kind of out of left field, which you don't always get a lot of when you're dealing with unbelievers because they're just drawing from the text. It's more so, and I don't, not to say left field, let me just shift that a bit. When you're doing this often with believers and those of the faith, they'll bring in other things into the passage. Well, that reminds me of the book of Nahum. And when the prophet was on the mountain, and it's like, just ask the question, well, where do you see that in the text? And they'll say, well, no, I was just reading it this morning. It's like, that's great, but let's just do our best to stay in the text and see what we can learn just straight from here. And so collective retelling really does allow the group to stay on the same page, and then gives everybody an opportunity to point out maybe a small detail or two that are missed. I'm just going to give a general retelling. So in this story here, Jesus found a man in the temple and told him to sin no more. The man went and told the religious leaders that it was Jesus who healed him, and they began to persecute him because he was healing on the Sabbath. And he said he did it because his father was working, and so he was working. Then they started trying to kill him even the more because by calling Jesus his father, they knew he was also saying that he was equal with God. So Jesus responded by saying that he does what he sees his father doing, and because the Father loves the Son, he shows him what he's doing. And not only that, the Father has given him power to give life, to judge people, and that everyone should honor the Son in the same way that they honor the Father. So our main takeaway from the passage as it relates to the title, Son of the Living God, is that Jesus is equal with God. Jesus is equal with God. So you want to write that underneath the John 5:14 through 23 passage. So here's the question I want to ask is, how does this passage impact your view of Jesus? How does this passage impact your view of Jesus? I'm going to give you a couple minutes to review the passage and write down your answer. I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes. And just remember, this is not a time for necessary discussion. We want to leave the room a little bit silent. So for those who are more of an internal processor, they have the ability to get as much as they can out of the passage. So take about 2 or 3 minutes to reflect and write down your answer. All right. So now we're going to go back to our reference passage in Matthew 16, and we're going to read it one more time. So that we can find our fourth title here. Ready? Let's read. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, So our last title we see is in verse 18, but it's an indirect one. Jesus says, I will build my church. I will build my church. And by calling it the church his church, he's saying that he's the head of it. And so the title that we'll use is Head of the Church. And so because that's more of an indirect title, meaning we don't find it specifically in this passage, we're actually going to write it down. So draw a circle to remind you of a head, I guess, and write in it, head of the church. It reminds me of a head. It may not remind you of a head, but it reminds me of one. So even though we don't see that title in this passage, we actually do see that title in another passage. It's in the book of Colossians. It's in Colossians 1, 15 through 18. So we'll write that down underneath our symbol. Colossians 1, 15 through 18. So in this passage, the writer, who's Paul, is describing Jesus to his readers and painting a picture of his glory. So we're going to read that passage together. Ready? Let's read. He is the image of the invisible God. Amen. Yes, Colossians 1. Thank you, Avery. So here in this passage, as the writer's painting a picture of Jesus' glory, he points out that he's the image of the invisible God, that he created all things, that all things are held together by him, that he is the head of the church, and that he is to be preeminent, which means he's greater than all things. So our takeaway as it relates to this title, where it says, we see where it says that he is the head of the body, the church. Our takeaway is just that, is that his body is the church. His body is the church. So you want to write that down underneath your passage. So how does this passage impact your view of Jesus? I'm going to give you a moment to write it down. Now, if we were together after you wrote down how this passage impacted your view of Jesus, or even as you were reviewing the passage, we would dialogue about it. And you would share with me how it impacted your view, and I would share with you how it impacted my view of Jesus. And I'm going to give you time to do both of that collectively here in a moment. But just for now, I want you to write it down. If you're still writing, keep writing. I see that many of you are done, so I just want to give you the next question, and if you're still writing about how this impacted your view of Jesus, you'll have enough time to answer both. But as a reminder, we always want to engage with the Word of God for transformation and not just information. Transformation and not just information. So based on how these two titles, Son of the Living God and Head of the Church, based on how they impacted your view of Jesus, how do you think the Lord wants you to respond or change? And I want you to write it down as an I will statement. And as a reminder, an I will statement is just a commitment to action. And it just simply can look like, I will blank and will blank within the next 48 hours, just like we mentioned earlier. The two things you want is something that's measurable and time-based. So meaning somebody else could say, yes, you did it, or no, you did not. And then just a simple step that you can take to get things beginning within the next day or two. So I'm going to give you a few moments to reflect and write down your I will statement, in addition to finishing up for those of you who are still writing about how this impacted your view of Jesus. All right, now I'm going to give you some time to partner up, and I want you to share with your partner how the titles impacted your view of Jesus and your I will statement. Partners, listen carefully to their I will statement and just make sure that it's both measurable and that there's the time element involved. And whoever's sharing, allow your partner just to highlight if one of those elements are not clear or not there or not subjective or measurable, because it's actually going to help you to walk it out. So I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes. We'll put up the 5-minute timer. And you guys can share and dialogue however you want to within that time. Just make sure that you both have an opportunity to share. And I want you to, after you share your I will statements, pray for the other person and ask the Lord to help with their I will statement. And again, if you've never prayed for someone out loud, just simply ask the person, may I ask God to help you with that? And of course, they're going to say yes. I hope so. I mean, that's what this time is for. You should say yes. Brothers and sisters, please say yes. And then, if you're praying, just simply say, God, please help them with that. Amen. Very simple prayer. All right, so we're going to put the 5-minute timer up now. Go ahead and partner up. All right. This is fantastic. I see some great conversations. I got a chance to be in on some great conversations. And here's what I want to tell you. These titles are likely going to generate, in many regards, more questions from people. You do not have to become the answer person. Neither should you be. Because if you walk away having answered all the questions, they may not go out and multiply it because they say, I don't have all the answers that you just gave me. What you simply want to remember is the purpose of the tool is to know Christ. We want to learn him better. We want to see, how did Jesus refer to himself? What does the Bible say about him? What can we take away from those things? And so as a person presses in and uses these tools in the different ways that we're going to talk about, that's what's going to naturally happen. So here's what I want to do. I want to give you guys some time now to practice this tool. And here's how we're going to do this. This is going to be really sloppy because I'm going to do it really fast. But I want you guys to draw this tool back for one another. And you're going to do it in a very, very basic, simplistic way. And I'm going to show you exactly what I want you to do with one another and exactly how you would do it. We would do it if we're together. So on a fresh piece of paper, you're just going to say, the name of our pillar is Know Christ. And the main passage we use for that is Matthew 16, 13 through 18. And in that passage, we learn 4 titles about Jesus. The first one is Son of Man. So we draw a little stick man. We learn about the title from Daniel 7, 13 through 14. And our main takeaway from the passage is that Jesus is our eternal King. The next one we see is that he's the Christ. And so we draw a crown to show power as a symbol of power. We learn about that title from Luke 4, 16 through 21. And our main takeaway from that passage is that he heals and sets free. The next title is Son of the Living God. We draw a heart because the Father loves the Son, and then go on from there. Just very simple. This is the title and the picture. This is the passage. This is the takeaway. This is the title and the picture. This is the passage and the takeaway. And then do that for all 4. All I want you to do is just get familiar with saying the main things and drawing it out. So you don't have to turn to any passages. You don't have to explain anything. This is the title and the picture. This is the main passage. This is the takeaway. This is the next title and picture, main passage, takeaway. Real basic. It should take you 3 minutes max. Good to go? Can I get some thumbs up? Lots of thumbs up. I don't see some thumbs up, but at least you're being honest. So I think at least most of your partners put their thumbs up. If nothing else, your table leaders should have their thumbs up. If your table leader did not have their thumb up, come tell me so I can write their name and see them after class. But I think you guys will do well. Just remember, keep it very basic, very simple. I want one person to do it for one person, and then the next person do it for the next. Ready? Partner up and go. I'm going to put the drawing back on the board. Feel free to use your own notes, or you can use the board. All right, everybody. So as I was walking around, I saw that a lot of you are really grasping the tools, and some of you are having a little bit of challenge, and some of you are just kind of all the way lost. And here's what I want to say. I said this to a friend of mine just now. I just want to say it to those of you who may feel a little bit confused. There is nothing in and of you that is falling short. Remember, this is not necessarily designed for this type of setting. This is designed for a living room, for a kitchen table, for a coffee shop, for personal, relational interaction, where we've done this over the course of, 2 90-minute sessions. But if I were sitting down with you, we might spend 90 minutes just going off of this. And so this is really going to mean something to you. And then when we go on to the Christ, every piece of this is going to really mean something to you because we'll have dialogued about it and shared our hearts as it relates to these things. So if it's not all clicking, that's okay. Essentially, what we've kind of done is just giving you framework and information and a light general way of experiencing it, but where it's going to make the most sense is when it gets put into practice. So here's what I would say is the first step that you can take to make this more tangible for you is go home and read these passages. Go home and match them up to the titles and the takeaways. Because you're wondering, why am I using a crown up here if the takeaway is eternal king down here? Doesn't a king wear a crown? That's what I would wonder. That's what I wondered when I drew it out years ago. And I was like, doesn't it make more sense to have a crown? It's like, no, because the title Son of Man. Why would you not draw a man? But then when you sit down and you realize the beauty in Daniel 7, and you're like, wow, Jesus is my eternal king. Like, now I love the title Son of Man. And then when I see how he's come to heal and set me free, I'm like, he really is the anointed one. He really is the one with all power. He deserves to have a crown. So it has to mean something to you for you to be able to give it away to others, rather than just what you're doing right now is just regurgitating information. It's what I saw on the board. I'm going to do my best to regurgitate it. Go home, meditate on this, read it, know Christ. And when you know Christ, every piece of this will become special. All right, so I want to give you a few ways to know how to actually use this tool, because that's going to help solidify some of these things. And I'm going to give you 3. One is as part of the 6 pillars. So as you're discipling someone, you're taking them through Mark 3:13 through 15, and the 6 key things that Mark highlights about that journey. One of them is that Jesus' desire was to know him. But keep in mind, there's 6 pillars, not 6 lessons. In other words, they don't have to go in order. I rarely start with, if I'm walking a new believer through it, I'll go through this one. But when I was meeting with someone middle of last year, they had a coworker who had a need. So we started with pillar 6, authority in Christ. Because I said, you know what? You're probably going to need to cast that demon out. So I was prepared to start with pillar 1 because our plan was let's go in order. But I said, no, you're going into a setting where you're going to need a different tool in your toolkit. So you use this as part of the model. The second is with seekers. So when you talk with someone and maybe they have a different religious background or they have a different opinion about Jesus, you simply say, hey, can I show you what the Bible actually says about him. And then you say, well, one of the best places for us to go is Matthew 16, 13 through 18. Let's read that passage together. And I'm going to draw you a couple little pictures to help you remember. And you just take them through this one. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. It's like, hey, would you like to get together again? And maybe go over that second title that we saw in Matthew 16? And then now you just set up, you got 4 coffee dates ahead of you in which you're very well equipped to walk them through to learn a little bit more about Jesus. And like, no, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, no one's ever explained it to me that way. And I didn't do anything special. I just read the passage and drew a picture. And the last one is when you're sharing the gospel. It's when you're sharing the gospel. I started sharing a testimony with you last week, and I said that I would finish the story. We have a few minutes here, and so I want to just take the opportunity. I'm going to bring up my friend Micah to come. So I was in a setting where I received a message from a friend, and they said, will you pray for this family, specifically this son? Essentially, they had shared that the son was suicidal. It was not a family that went to church. But they were desperate, and they were willing to get help. And so I met them at the church before the service in the city that I was in, and it was clear that we could not wait until after service to minister to this family. So we went to a back room. Micah was there. He came with me, and I'm going to just have him briefly share with you what happened.
Yeah, we'd gotten into the back room, and the mother was obviously very nervous, or not nervous, but scared for her son. And really, she felt that he was a good kid deep down, but at home he was destructive. At school he was destructive, and also destructive with the law. And he probably would have been in jail if he hadn't been a juvenile at the time. One night, though, when he was being hard on his siblings, his mother sent him to his room, but as he walked down the hallway, he turned around and in a different voice said to her, would you like to meet the person that's living inside your son? This is the first, last, and only time we will do this. And then she agreed, and they basically sat down on their couch, and she talked to the person living within her son, and at the end of it, recounting things that he'd done in his life. And then at the end said, in 4 days, Clarence is either going to kill someone or he's going to kill himself. So as you can see why she was so highly motivated to have something done as soon as possible. And so we basically said, and we had kind of had the same idea, well, the spirit is not going to kill your son. They're just trying to instill fear. But then basically she said, well, he's been trying to the last couple of days. And so then we started talking with Clarence himself, and at first he didn't want to open up, and I'd basically given up, but Chris stuck with it, and ultimately gave this a corny banana joke, and it opened it up, and he started to smile, and Chris commented that he had a nice smile, and he proceeded to tell us the story about this shadow person that had presented itself to him when he was about 5 or 6, offering, if you stay away from God, I will give you power. And as a 5 or 6-year-old, he took that deal, and we asked him, did you actually receive power? And he said, yeah, I have unusual strength, and I don't feel pain emotionally or physically. And basically from there, we assured him, we believe what you're saying. These things happen. They're not entirely uncommon. And that we acknowledge, hey, this shadow person does have power, but we know someone with more power. And then we went through Colossians 1 with him, and then we basically gave him another offer to break the deal that he'd made with the shadow person and to make an agreement with Jesus. And then Clarence had actually accepted that, and then once he had accepted it, Chris turned to his mother and said, now it's a wonderful thing what he's done today. Do you want to take it as well? And she decided to make that decision as well. And then we immediately made preparations for baptism for him. And then I had to leave, and then Chris picked it up from there.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so this was a family who, plagued by darkness, had made an agreement with the demon when he was 5 and started to destroy his life and the life of his family. He had been trying to commit suicide every day for the last 3 days. They were on day 4, in which the demon said at day 4, it will be done, so they were terrified. And all I did, because I had just taken somebody else through this tool, I just said, I know someone who's got more power. And I just went through Colossians 1, 15 through 18. And I said, do you want to break your agreement with the shadow person and make an agreement with the person we just read about? And he said, yes. And he said he wanted to take the step of baptism. Asked his mom, do you want to make the same agreement with the same man we just read about? And she said yes. And so we went across a field to a house that had a bathtub and baptized both the mother and the son. So let me just give you some closing points of what to do between now as you go from here. And it's just the 3 phrases we've been using: share, pray, and obey. Share, pray, and obey. 1, share the tool with someone. The same way you just shared with your partner, share it with someone else. Just walk them through it. I learned about how to know Christ a little better. It comes from Matthew 16. There's 4 titles. I want to just draw you some basic pictures. And also share about your I will statement. So that way you can get accountability. Again, make sure you share with somebody who's not in this room and who's not your spouse. Your I will. You can share the picture with your spouse if your spouse is not in this room or in the Eden Center. Or if you're in the Eden Center, they're not in this room. Pray. And just give God praise for at least 2 of these titles during your UTC time. Say, Jesus, you're the Son of Man. And I don't really know what that means, but it looks really cool in Daniel. And then lastly, obey and take the steps forward to fulfill your I will statement. Remember, it's a commitment to action based on how you feel the Lord wants you to respond or change. Lastly, parents, please make sure that you go swiftly to pick up your children. I know this is an attractive setting to fellowship, but you can get them and then come back here to do so. And then if you're in the Eden Center, if you're willing and able to help tear down, that's fantastic. Thank you guys so much. We're going to invite our pastor up to close.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your faithfulness toward this church, this community, as we give you our yes and our obedience to make disciples who make disciples. Lord, I'm asking that you would pour out fresh grace and strength over your sons and daughters. God, I'm asking, would you increase zeal, passion, and diligence? May we not be lacking, Lord God, in zeal as we pursue these efforts. I thank you, Jesus, for enthusiasm. Lord, as we as children just humbly take steps to apply what we're learning. Thank you for a community that is saying yes to your command to make disciples. Yes to the great commandment to love you most. And yes to the great commission to make disciples of the nations. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his face towards you and give you shalom peace. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God bless you guys. See you next week.